Hello and welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to share with you the exactly why we lost to Tottenham. And positive is I want to show how nice it was to use the tactical board on Big Up because we were able to that we used during the watch alongs now that just came out because it was able to really demonstrate before the game and predict exactly what would happen. And I can actually show that with images and things like that. But unfortunately, a very basic, poor performance from United all around, and one of the most basic, boring, and predictable tactical plans when the alternative could have done so much better. So let's get right into breaking down, starting with me talking in before the game, a little clip here, and showing exactly how I thought we should play and what we actually ended up doing. Defensively, with Ugarte and Kobe Mainu in here, the biggest thing is going to be there's no level of awful that Bruno can reach to get him dropped. Well, I guess not. But I think defensively, the biggest thing for me today, and I think this will probably be switched to be honest, but is that I really don't want to see this happening. I don't want to see this happening because if we do this, then and we're getting up here and we get attacked in behind, right? Um, and Dallow's getting up through the middle and all of that, then I think Brennan Johnson against Martinez in space is not ideal. And then I think that Werner trying to get into these spaces is not ideal. I think these are bad matchups for us. If the ball can get in here, I mean, Werner's finishing is what it is, but if they're getting these balls into space, then I think that them up against these in these matchups is not necessarily ideal. And obvious because I think Solanke can obviously then kind of sit on Delict. So that's what I'm hoping we don't see. This scenario would play out many, many times through the game, which I'll show. But when the first goal happens 2.5 minutes into the game, you can already see it. Dallo is inverting up the pitch, and he's already a few steps behind Brennan Johnson when this transition starts. You can see our midfield is wide open, our forwards are stretched, everybody is chasing the game forward through the chaos that we're trying to get to, which I'll talk about in a minute again and show exactly how I showed we would attack, which would lead to these defensive problems. But you can see Dallo is stuck up there in the first image. In the second image, you can see that Ugarte's job was tasked with sticking to James Madison, and you can watch that in the first 5 to 10 minutes that he was actually kind of stuck to him, kind of man marking him in the midfield. Kabi Mainu has somebody. Werner is sitting on Mazraoui. Um, and Solanke is actually kind of in between Lissandro and Delict, doing a really good job there to keep them distracted. Now, Bruno is also caught way up the pitch because we're playing Chaos Ball. So his man is actually Van de Ven here, but they're on the same level. Van de Ven is going the opposite direction. And so Bruno Fernandes would not have the speed to catch up to him here. And that puts, again, Van de Ven ends up on goal with he ends up right on goal against Delict, gets past him. Brennan Johnson beats, and that means Solanke is on Lissandro, and that means Brennan Johnson is free at the back post because he's ahead of Dallo. Now, Dallo could have certainly worked harder there and should have, but it's the matchup was already poor. They had already broken through our structure in that way, and Brennan Johnson was already a couple steps ahead and of Dallo, and is very fast as well. So either way, it was a poor structure. Dallo inverting right in the first few minutes. The extra man was then able to break between Mazraoui and Delict, with Werner sitting on Mazraoui. Their wingers sitting on our fullbacks because our fullbacks are essentially pinned because our wingers are narrow. But we'll talk about more of that in just a moment. Now, we would actually see these warning signs show up identically on the other side. Here we have Mazraoui, who's inverting for an attack. We'll lose the ball. And again, because our rest defense structure is so bad, what actually should be happening here is almost the reverse, which is you have Dallo, Delict, and Lissandro. And Delict should be uptight But now you're asking Delict to be a channel defender, something he's also not good at, up against Werner. So similarly to where if it happens on the other side, which we'll cover in a minute, you now have on this side your right center back being your right back with the fast winger sitting on him, and he cannot catch Werner. He's never going to catch Werner. Fortunately for us, of course, as I said as well, Werner's finishing is really poor. Now, this actually happened 2 or 3 times through the game. Werner getting through Mazraoui and Delict onto them as they planned for, but his finishing was really poor, or the game would have been a hell of a lot worse. So yeah, but you can see the exact scenario playing out in the opposite side now when Mazraoui inverts that there's a runner on Delict and it results in a 1v1 for Tottenham. Sandro isolated on the left. We better not lose the ball. Alo's way up there. Oh boy. Here we go. There it is. Sandro in space. Brennan Johnson. Spurs in. 3-on-4, 3-on-2. 2-0. So yeah, that was live during the watch along of the match. Just it was obvious, you could see Lissandro ending up in a situation where Dallow's inverting way up the pitch and Brennan Johnson is just sitting by him. But United weren't in control. Dallow's just going. And Lissandro shifted all the way over to the left to defend the wide areas. He ends up not only against Brennan Johnson, but against Kulusevski as well in a 2-on-1 in space. That's the exact scenario on the other side that Timo Werner got in 3-4 times. And it results in the second goal. So exactly how you could have predicted in the pre-match, which I did, and laid out with the tactics as to what we didn't want to do defensively. And really, we played directly into Tottenham's hands. And both of the goals came as a consequence of that, both of the first two. Beyond that, they scored on a set piece, but the game was essentially over. Now, that's what happened with the goals that were scored against us. I laid out as well exactly the problem with this basic thinking of attack, and I'll show you the team shapes because I even laid out exactly how we would play and how Tottenham would play, unfortunately. And there was 2 ways we could go about it. One would be good, one would be bad. Because if we're playing this front three the way that we can, we've done it before, or this was kind of the intention in preseason, right? Was to play a bit of this like false nine with 2 runners and behind. And I think the key to it in possession is going to be getting them narrow, right? Getting them close so that you can kind of sit on Bentancur, especially as the only defensive midfielder, get these guys against them, and then Bruno can actually make some overloads even in the middle, right? Get in through the lines a bit, force one of their other midfielders to defend. I think that's pretty key because then you have all these these angles around the box. But then the other factor is, of course, our fullbacks, right? If we can get our fullbacks actually high here, then with the center backs occupied and with this kind of overloads, when they've got to step in, we're going to get spaces for the fullbacks. We're going to get spaces for the fullbacks. And, and that'll allow us to actually do what we want, passing it over here, running in here, and then crashing the box and making for some better football. Well, hold on. This is fun. And making for some better football, right? Because this is what this is kind of for is getting all these players in narrow so that we can really overload them. If they have to bring their wingers back to defend against it, well then, push the defense up really high and don't let them get the ball. Basically, that's how I see it. If they've got to bring their wingers back to defend against all of this, then we can press and we can actually control the game and not really give them any space. You can have Ugarte sitting on Madison, Kobe on Kulusevski, so they don't really have that, and then you can win this battle. And really that's how I see it. That's where the fullbacks can be so useful. If they're in here, then we can sustain kind of pressure. And obviously it has its risks, right? Like this is where all football has its risks. You play like this, you don't want to give the ball away cheaply because you've got a lot of men forward, but you want to be so aggressive that you can really pin their players back. And I think that that's what we've got to do. So there was laying out how United could use the narrow front two to actually control the game. The idea there was go to win and to have control and to have possession and to really get into Tottenham's half. And you can see that, in general, the idea was not just attack with four, but really commit to it. It requires commitment. Playing a very high intensity possession and controlling style of play requires full commitment. It requires the pressing. It requires following up all those actions. You can see on the first on that example with Werner, you know, De Ligt is way deep. We didn't really commit to the press. We didn't really commit to sitting high, to getting in there. And unfortunately, we didn't commit to that. And instead, we did something the opposite, which I'll show in a minute. That was again highlighted by those defensive matchups where we really just tried to stretch the pitch and only getting behind with two runners for the whole first half. Ironically, when we were down to 10 men, we actually pushed up a bit higher. But yeah, basically, to do this, it requires bravery, it requires commitment, and it requires pressing and counter pressing. Ugarte had a really poor game, I thought. He's going to. I think, unfortunately, I'm going to have to give this one to the Ugarte haters. He's going to flop under Ten Hag. Because if we are going to play a passive style that isn't predicated on a high pressing and counter pressing and ball winning style of play, and we're just going to, be hitting on the break or sitting deep or having him sit in front of the back four, he's going to be bad. He's not good running backwards. Neither is De Ligt. Neither is Lissandro. Every one of them is good moving forwards towards play and shutting it down. But unfortunately, we did the opposite. So the team choices, the choices of Garnacho and Rashford, it's not a personnel issue there. It's how you apply them and put it all together. If you're sending them alone by themselves, then the pitch is just going to be stretched and you're going to have big gaps. That's why, as I showed in there, you want everybody pushing all the way up so that your fullback can sit on their wingers and pin them deep, force them to actually track back so they don't have the spaces in behind and cover everybody. But that's exactly what we didn't do. Instead, we did something else. If we can pin them a bit and actually play the way that we want, um, you know, then we have enough to win a game like this. This is, getting all your attackers up and getting this essentially 6-on-6 in the back will allow us to win the game, and that's kind of been the plan. That's really was the plan overall, is to play this kind of football with the fullbacks. The downside is, you're in the replies, Hamza. The downside to all of this is you actually have to do that. You have to commit, because the alternative is that we're doing this, right? Let me kind of reset everybody for the moment. The alternative is we tuck Dallo in. We go like this. We have Dallo and Ugarte deep. We end up with Kabi Mainu and Bruno up here. And it's like this. I think that this is the more boring kind of modern tactical way where you have to invert the fullback for the build-up. But then you have this problem of, trying to, I don't know, in the front three, this is an issue. And then, of course, you also get runners against your left center back as if they're a fullback. So, yeah, I mean, it depends. If we invert it, I think it would play right into their hands, because they can sit on us like this. And I don't like these battles, especially like here. I think this is bad in space just because of speed. I think that this one I think this one's okay, but it's still not your ideal one. And I think that this is a tough one for Delict too. Like these are good battles. Um, these are good battles that I think will play into their hands. And the thing is that we'd have to commit everybody forward, and even still, we're not going to be an overload. It's going to be at it's 5-on-5 and a goalkeeper like that. If we invert, we won't really make, I think, any kind of numerical advantages here. And then, if we're just kind of pumping them in behind, even worse for me is that you're having Rashford and Garnacho run against Romero and Van de Ven. And our whole physical and pace advantage is neutralized if we're spending the game like this. Van de Ven, Garnacho's, there's not a ton of center backs that can keep up with kind of the speedy players that we have, but these are two of them. And so I think it would be maybe wrong, I guess, to just rely on this to win the game. But I'm concerned that that is the approach that we're going to take. And then I think, unfortunately, it's going to end up with us having their fullbacks able to be very aggressive. And they have aggressive fullbacks. So, ideally, we don't do this and we actually take advantage of their aggressive fullbacks. So that's exactly what we did, unfortunately. That alternative plan, exactly what we did. And as I said, it played right into Tottenham's hands. It's exactly what they wanted and exactly what they hoped for. It means they could use their energetic midfielders to continuously move us side to side. And it means that they could have runners one-on-one against our fullbacks and against our center backs. It's exactly what they did, and exactly what we did too, was try to pump balls through to Garnacho and Rashford in behind against two of the most physical and fastest center backs in all of Europe. And just below this, you can see the exact team shape that we had and that Tottenham had compared to the map that I showed there of what I thought, unfortunately, we could do. And every single player for Tottenham and for us is exactly where I said they would be over the course of the game. It was a complete bottle job by Ten Hag in these tactics. It was cowardly, it was boring, it was basic, it was thoughtless, and unfortunately, it cost us the game. And honestly, I couldn't do with the comments saying, "Oh, you don't know more than a PL manager." It doesn't matter. Um, One of the life lessons I'm going to teach you now is that thinking and observation are two different things. And you don't have to be a genius to observe. And a lot of things that people think are genius are really observation. And anybody can observe. And don't let people fool you from appealing to authority where can't trust your eyes on what you see and what you observe. Always, always, always focus on observing. That's a life lesson. And that is something I'm qualified to talk about. Um, Definitely observe. And if someone like me can observe this, watching it, seeing exactly what's going to play out, looking, I wasn't thinking about what was going to happen. I don't have to be that particularly intelligent to do it. I'm just some guy sitting at my computer, but I can observe. I do have eyes. I do know what I'm looking at. And I think, unfortunately, what happens to managers is they get too in their head. When things are struggling, when people are under pressure, happens to everybody, they withdraw more and more and more into themselves, and they start to overthink things and they start to question things, and they end up not really being able to observe what's actually happening anymore objectively. And I think that's where Ten Hag is at this point in time. Postecoglou was obviously able to see exactly what we were going to do and plan for it, but we couldn't see what they were going to do. At least Ten Hag couldn't, and so they completely outclassed us in a really, really simple level um, from a tactical perspective, and it really was that easy. It's that simple. If that is our plan away at home against Tottenham, then we're in real trouble because again, it's this is where I mentioned that when they were looking at the pitfalls of some of the plans being made, you use Dalot to shore up the midfield, and now it opens up pitfalls everywhere else and problems everywhere else. And that's exactly what Tottenham took advantage of. Anyone could see it. And so this game was coming. And I don't know how Ten Hag adjusts from it now, but quite rightly and quite honestly, he does pretty much have the next two games to see if he can save his job. If they go as poorly as this one's, then serious conversations will be happening through the international break about what to do next, and rightly so, because and sometimes that's as simple as it is not being able to see what's actually going on anymore once the pressure builds and once you are caught up in problem solving. You got to be able to take a step back because the problem we're trying to solve in our midfield, which is actually solved by pressing high and keeping Ugarte and a partner together, that has now been solved by a new solution of putting Dallo into the midfield, has created a whole host of other issues that are problems in attack and that are problems in defense. The other issue is that we need to commit. That means our front line has to press all the time, and our back line has to follow up with it, and our fullbacks have to follow up behind our wingers in the wide areas on that press to pin fullbacks and pin wingers. So we're going to see this again and again and again. And as I mentioned, when we play against actually good forwards, this plan would not work. And that's what we saw against Tottenham. Exactly what I laid out was the concerns after Palace and after 20, when Palace tried to do this. They tried to pump balls through to get their forwards onto Lisandro Martinez, but they were not able to. They just didn't have the quality. I said as soon as we faced good teams with speedy forwards, they were going to expose the system, and that's what happened against Tottenham. So big questions to answer for Ten Hag because this was one of the worst tactical performances we've seen, and a lot of the players performed really poorly as well, and they have to answer for this. But at the same time, the demands need to be way higher on actually committing to a forward-thinking pressing style of play for United to move ahead into anything and stop trying to problem solve it by making tactical solutions that really result in more issues. And I don't know that Ten Hag has it in him to fix that. We haven't seen the evidence of it yet. We haven't seen the evidence of his demands for everybody to commit to the press, and to create goals through systemic, sustained pressure rather than letting his forwards cheat and hit on the break, because that is essentially plan A most of the time. So we'll see what happens in the ensuing games and in the coming week. But if it looks anything like this, then unfortunately, I don't think there's any way to turn it around because it's very, very easy for teams to look at and to expose. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting. And please join me on Big Up for these watch alongs because with this tactics board and everything, it's been a lot of fun. It was really interesting, really good experience to do that on the first time, even though the result was bad, to look at what would possibly happen and be able to show it. I hope you found this video interesting and insightful, and I hope you have a good rest of your week. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. I'll see you in the next one.